In this chapter, the Alter Rebbe is explaining to us a little backstage, little inside point. And the premise or the entryway is through a direct analysis of a word, two words that we're all very familiar with, the words asor and mutter. Now, in the course of life, when somebody says, what does that mean? We translate it. This is permitted, mutter, and this is prohibited, asor. However, a closer look in those words reveals, and you recognize it because we do say it in the davening, matir asurim, which translates as he releases the bound. That the word asur, although colloquially it means you're not allowed to, what it more literally means is bound up or chained up. And the word mutter means released or unchained. The point being that when Torah says that something is asur, so a simplest example, something is not kosher food, what it means is that its godliness is trapped and cannot be accessed through direct interaction. That is, you can't access the godliness in non-kosher food by eating it. When something is mutter, therefore, it means its godliness can be accessed. And here's the real double down difficult point. If we just take the position that if it's kosher, it's therefore kosher, so as long as it's kosher and I washed my hands and I said a bracha, I can do whatever I want. But since now we understand that the word kosher also, which means readied or prepared, that's really what the word kosher means. It means readied. And mutter means, I'll use this word, eligible, released. So now when we interact with it, that is, when we eat it, we have to make sure that we take advantage of that opportunity. There is a story, it's like one of these Eastern European, a little bit harsh. So, trigger warning if you have sensitivity, may not work so nicely. But you know, that real harsh kind of a sense of humor that the Cossack says to the Chassid, I don't understand why you guys always arguing with the other Jews. You look the same to me. What's the difference? They do the same rituals. You do the same rituals. What is the difference? So he said, and it's memorialized in one of these like poems. So he says to him, there is one position that holds that something that is kosher, you can indulge the death out of it. You just engage in it totally. And something that's usser, you could cheat a little bit once in a while. But what we have been taught is something that is usser till the death. That's a play on the word. And even something that's kosher is also just a little bit. It means it's eligible. It doesn't mean it's innately a virtuous thing. It's eligible. And therefore, when you interface with it, and again, the simplest example is eating, because everybody can relate to that, is that it's an opportunity to elevate in the service of Hashem. So we might say, well, based on this, let's just eat bread and water, basic subsistence. Not so fast and not so easy. Because even bread and water, if that's not the value is what is the purpose of my eating? And if I say, well, what do you mean? If I don't eat, I won't survive. That's not a good enough answer because then the second question becomes, and what happens if you don't survive? Because as we know, survival is very important, very, very important, but it's not the most important. There are things more important than being alive. We're not cavalier about it. We're not dismissive of it, but being alive is not innately godly because, again, just use this as the test case. Can an animal do that as well? Well, of course. Why does an animal eat? Because he's hungry. Why does an animal want to satiate his hunger? Either because of his discomfort or because of this intuitive desire for survival. So if I am acting merely out of my intuitive desire to survive, then I'm not really any different than the animal as well. So there's a sarcastic joke. Again, today's the sarcastic jokes. There's a sarcastic joke that, if you buy a used car for an extra $500, they'll put a dent in the back. So then you'll show him, you see how humble I am? Look at this old junker car. I mean, I would be embarrassed. And we have offset that. And the last line that we learned last week was the example of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, he lived a very, very opulent life with wealth and feasts and so on. And he said at the end of his life that he never had indulgent benefit from this world, even to the smallest degree. And that why then did he have all of this wealth and feasts and so on? Because it gave him stature with the government. He had a relationship with Mark Antony, and this gave him an opportunity to intercede on behalf of the Jewish people with the Roman government. Now, either he's lying because there's no equivocation in his statement, or he's absolutely telling the truth. There's no in between. So we take him as absolutely telling the truth, because it's not like, a person is equivocating here and there. It's either true or not true. And he says it, and we're taking it as true. Now, curiously, the very last phrase that we learned last week, the Alter Rebbe references this story, and he refers to him as Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Translation, our holy teacher. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi has numerous titles. Sometimes he's simply referred to as Rebbe, our teacher, or my teacher, or by his name, Rabbi Yehuda, or Rabbi Yehuda the Nasi. Why does the Alter Rebbe, because every word is precise, why does the Alter Rebbe specifically choose in this context to use the moniker Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our holy teacher? Well, part of the answer is the idea of ours, that it's something that we are all at least aspiring to do. And we've talked about this before. A lot of Tanya is seemingly so far out of reach that a person would say, well, I could never do this. I mean, I give up. I could never do this. And we've talked about, aspiration and expectation. Later on in chapter 19, which if I stop talking so much, we'll get there, the Alter Rebbe sort of slips almost, I'm saying jokingly, and he says, Halavai Beinani, we wish you'd be a Beinani. We say, what do you mean? Didn't you tell us we have to be a Beinani? Well, I did, but even I'm acknowledging that it's really something to pursue. We don't truly expect you to be a Beinani, but as we learned in Pirkei Avos, it is not within your rights to just give up. It is not incumbent upon you to completely execute it, but it's not within your permission to say, well, I give up. So we are in that pursuit. And the Alter Rebbe ordered that a person who doesn't reach this level has to undergo what is called chibut hakever, which basically is like the disintegration of the physical body after 120 in the grave. Now, we have a tradition, imagine people have heard, it's referenced in the Talmud, that the righteous, their bodies do not decompose. Obviously, it's not something that we would ever test. We don't dig up the bodies. Additionally, we have a suggestion that the righteous, when I say righteous, I mean the tzaddik, like we describe it here in Tanya, not just a real nice guy, their bodies do not communicate spiritual impurity, tumah. Why? Because their bodies are so absolutely aligned only with their neshama that they don't have the characteristics of the limited human capacity. They are exclusively and purely a transparent tool to the neshama. So when Hashem created the world, humans were going to live forever. Why? Because it reflected the godly origin. Just as Hashem is forever, so too everything Hashem created is forever. Since Adam and Chava failed and ate from the tree of knowledge, and Hashem says, on the day you do that, you will die, and they live to be 900 years old, but it means you have now affiliated yourself with that which is temporal, that which expires, that which dies. So that is the human characteristic. And that's why the body follows the nature of all things. All things expire. All things eventually decompose. So when the body takes on the character of the world, it includes this decomposition. The rarest of tzaddikim that their bodies have no sense of this physical world. They are literally a transparent tool only to the neshama. Well, those bodies take on the character of the neshama, which is eternality, which of course raises the question, why then do they pass away? And as we say of these great tzaddikim, because of the sin of the tree of knowledge. That is, that's the way the world is now orchestrated. This, again, it's a little off topic, but it illustrates the point why the ultimate level, especially as Chassidus understands it, is the coming to life of the dead, Tchias HaMesim. Not just because we'll enjoy that, not just because that will be so wonderful for us. The reason why is because Tchias HaMesim is the ultimate illustration of the physical being only in service of the spiritual. And this is what we're shooting for. So again, that which is asur, which its godliness is trapped, cannot be accessed, is asur, even to the point that it takes his life. Because the only value of physical life is to serve Hashem. And that which is mutter is also a little asur, because it's only eligible to be used in the service of Hashem. And again, as I use the analogy, even if I washed my hands and I said the blessing and I waited my turn and I took less than even I really could and I sit down, but in that moment when I am eating, what is the difference at that moment between the way I'm eating and the way an animal would eat? Or to use perhaps another analogy, we talk a lot about Kiddush Hashem. Everyone is familiar with this idea, that it is one of our greatest objectives. It's really associated with this week's Parsha, that a Jew should do Kiddush Hashem. Now, what does Kiddush Hashem mean? It means that people should look at us and be enamored with God. They should say, wow, God is great because look how the people behave. So what qualifies as Kiddush Hashem? Well, what if a Jew, and we've all gotten this email, you know how many Nobel Prizes Jews have won? Now, I'm not against Nobel Prizes, and it's very nice, but that's not a Kiddush Hashem, because, of course, a Gentile can also win a Nobel Prize. So the fact that a Jew wins a Nobel Prize is not innately a declaration of godliness. It's a nice thing. It's a wonderful, virtuous thing. But that's not innately descriptive of or announcing of Hashem. That's a great accomplishment, fantastic accomplishment. Again, important. I'm not against it. I'm not diminishing it. But where is the godliness? And that's what we're talking about here, that kosher behavior is not innately godly unless we make its godliness godly. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is somewhat alluding to by using the moniker, the title of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our holy rabbi. He's ours in the sense that we are also, again, expected or aspirational to reach some degree of that kind of conduct, similar to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, where our godliness is fully on display. When you don't see me, my physical self, you see my neshama. That's what we're looking for. So can we engage in the physical world without any self-serving benefit? And again, it may seem so unattainable, but yet we really do touch it from time to time. Again, my example, when you're eating matzah at the Seder, and somebody would say, why are you eating matzah at 11 o'clock at night? Answer, total service of Hashem. When I shake the lulav and esrog, why are you doing that? Service of Hashem. Why are you sitting in the sukkah? Service of Hashem. As evidence that we're not eating matzah today. We're not sitting in the sukkah today. Why? Total service of Hashem. And so on. So that's what it's about. It's about can we be or how can we be fully transparent to the infinity of Hashem. Okay, so here we go. What about words? So we spoke about food. But what about words? Now, remember that speaking, communication, is the distinctively human gift. when we refer to all the different forms of existence, we talk about domain, the inanimate. We talk about someach, that which grows. We talk about chai, that which is alive. And when we speak about human beings, we specifically use the word midaber, the speakers. So when we speak, so there is, of course, dvarim ha'asurim, prohibited words, such as gossip and lying and so on. So we know about verbal sins. Now, the kids crying in the playground, we can tell them sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And that's a good defense mechanism for the kids that the other kid is making fun of. But in real life, words are a lot stronger than deeds. So words are a unique opportunity for the human being to express his godliness, just as God created the whole world through words. So what about words? So again, if it's prohibited, that which is usser, usser, even to death. So again, prohibited words, lying, slander, mockery, etc. And then there are, of course, mitzvah words, the recitation of Shema, the recitation of blessings, etc. But what about dvarim beheter, that are permitted, but they're batel? Now, the word batel is a word we have seen before. And on the one hand, our greatest aspiration is bittul, to be surrendered from our humanity and be exclusively and entirely transparent to godliness. And on the other hand, the word batel can mean that which we have annulled. The one drop of milk in the 60 drops of meat becomes batel. So when we speak dvarim betelim, which is commonly translated as, well, it's just sort of nonsense. It's nothing bad. It's nothing good. Well, in that sense, it is negating. It is negating. Sometimes not saying something is not always the best move. And saying something unnecessary is, too much, starts to diminish it. Very simple example. If someone is giving you instructions, you don't want flowery poetry. You just want very precise instruction. So dvarim betelim literally translates as annulling words. It's undermining the value of words. But here, they're beheter. Now, it's a little bit difficult to come up with a scenario of words that are pointless, but are still, again, released, that their godliness is evident. But the Alter Rebbe gives us an example. For example, a person who's unskilled, because what do you mean? You have nothing to say. You can always be studying Torah. You can always be reciting words of Psalms. So you got to kind of come up with a pretty creative example. Excuse me, of Devarim Betelim that are released. So here's an example: a person he's incapable of studying, or a person is in a place, where they're not allowed to study Torah. They're in the shower and they're not allowed to study Torah. Again, you'd have to kind of come up with a little bit of a creative idea. So the person will have to repair this through something called kaf hakela. Now, before we even get into what kaf hakela is, and we'll understand why that is the repair for dvarim betelim, it's important to understand why the Alter Rebbe is mentioning this here. On the one hand, he's mentioning it here because, again, our rule that just because something is permitted doesn't make it godly. Permitted just means it's an opportunity for godliness. And in a certain odd way, you could argue that if something that is permitted and is misused, is abused, is in that sense not a godly thing. It's almost worse, because I took the opportunity to do something godly and I passed it up. And in a way, that's almost worse, because I think, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't doing nothing all the other kids wasn't not doing. Right. But not doing something wrong is not a way to go through life. Right. We're not learning Tanya to find out, what do I got to do and I won't get yelled at? Or, what do I got to do and I'm going to go to heaven? For that, we got 100 other books. Remember, we said this in the very beginning, and the Alter Rebbe lays out that we're not scorekeeping here and saying, well, as long as I got one more in the win column than the loss column, I'm going to go to heaven. If that's your goal, you're probably not going to like learning Tanya very much. It's not going to be all that meaningful to you if you're just trying to get into heaven. So here, the Alter Rebbe is pointing out again this idea: nothing is nothing. Everything is an opportunity to either become closer to Hashem or, essentially, by definition, to become distant from Hashem. And again, hopefully not, but I can only imagine that everybody has experienced this at the human level. You have people that you're friends with, and then time goes on and you don't speak with them, and this, and you drift apart, and that's it. It's not because I did anything bad, or even, let's say, a person, maybe they didn't wish me mazel tov, or they didn't remember they didn't do anything bad, they just missed the opportunity, and as a result, again, it's not horrible, horrific, and drama, and so on. They just drifted apart. I don't know, we just don't talk as much as we used to, we just don't see each other. It happens. Well, that can happen with Hashem, too. Yeah, we're still friends, but it just drifts apart. And the Alter Rebbe's message, again, about how tenacious we have to be to sustain that relationship. But here the Alter Rebbe specifically points out that it's kaf hakela as the form of repair. Okay, what is kaf hakela? It sounds terrible. So kaf hakela is where the soul is slung from one side to the other. Now, this is not an amusement park ride. What it means is, when in the look back in life, we see the choices we made when we could have made a different choice. I could have bought stock in Amazon. Instead, I bought stock in something that went, kaplooey, pets.com, whatever it was. I could have done this, and instead I did that. So that's the characteristic. And it's not designed just to torment the person. It's designed to be a life lesson. Go back and learn from your mistake. Go back and see what it was that you could have done. And this is really a core message. The opportunity, and you think about this again in life. I mean, how often do you have the opportunity where you could say just a few words and welcome the new kid in the class, say, give someone some direction. You overhear somebody and they're going the wrong way, and you think, well, I don't want to say anything. I didn't do anything wrong. Or you could have pointed out to the guy, excuse me, you dropped your wallet, whatever it was. So the missed opportunity is the consequence of these dvarim b'telim. But getting down into something that's a little more demanding is aval dvarim asurim. What about prohibited words? Again, words that the godliness is trapped. And what are some examples of that? Kamei leitzanis. Now, leitzanis, we use it a little bit more softly to just mean joking around and so on. But more literally, it references mockery. And, it's a very tough thing. Can you be funny without making fun of someone else? And it's a classic schoolyard conduct. Of course, we would never do this. Adults are perfect. But where we form alliances through mockery of the other. Okay? So we are the good ones, and that one is the out one. And these are subtleties that can be very harsh. Lashon hara and lashon hara. And as you know, I don't repeat lashon hara, so listen closely the first time. So this idea, I want to get added with the Metzora. What is the purpose? What is the goal of lashon hara? The goal of lashon hara is a form of status enrichment. I have a secret. I have something. I put the other one down, and thus, at least in my mind, I elevate myself. But of course, everybody else is thinking, while they're laughing, well, I wonder what he says about me when I'm not in the room. This is what he says about that one. So these are asur. So it's a godly opportunity. And again, speech is godly. And again, just if God forbid you've ever encountered someone who is struggling with their capacity for speech, you realize how godly it is. Now, of course, animals don't speak and we're not frustrated by it, but this is the unique gift given to mankind, to be able to speak. And if we, God forbid, abuse it, we are plunging that godliness deeply. Shein mishalosh klipas hatmeis lagamre. This is shalosh klipas tameis. And therefore, in kafakel levadam moilatar lahavir tumasim nefesh vatzichra leir legehenim. And therefore, kafakela, the missed opportunity process, is not going to be enough. There's going to have to be a deeper scrubbing. Now, here the Alter Rebbe is really laying out for us a whole different level. I mean, what's the point? We got it. Okay, why is he sort of beating us up? We got it. Something that's usher, godliness can't be accessed. Something that's mutter, the godliness can be accessed. If you access it, you have fulfilled its purpose. If you don't, you're going to have this form of regret, like the person who could have, got in on the ground floor of Microsoft and they didn't. Because here's the distinction. When it came to the food example, so we know certain things are very clearly demarked, right? We have rules. You can eat this, you can't eat that. But when it comes to speech, yes, we have guidance like, don't speak Lashon Hara. But what does everyone who speaks Lashon Hara say? It's not Lashon Hara. It's not Lashon Hara. Again, unless someone is a psychopath, nobody consciously sins. They think, no, in my case, it's not so bad, or everybody does it, and I'm just kidding, whatever it is. We have a limitless list of justifications why we don't think it's doing something wrong. Now, when it comes to what we call colloquially treif, the person can't think, well, shrimp isn't shrimp. Shrimp is shrimp. That's it. That's what it is. But when the person is mocking, just kidding. When the person is speaking Lashon Hara, I'm just trying to protect you from that guy, and you should know that he's a bad guy. So here, it's a lot more within the variable of my purpose and intent. And therefore, there's less of a sense, well, how could it be shalosh klipas tameis legamre? I don't have that capacity. Hashem said, don't eat shrimp because its godliness is trapped. Hashem didn't say, don't say these precise words. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. We impose this trap, this corrosion of ungodliness around these words when we speak words of slander and lying and things that we discussed. The same thing is when a person could have been doing words of Torah, and instead they're doing Dvarim B'Teilim. Just nonsense. Nothing evil, just nonsense. Like the old joke of the mother who says to her son, what are you doing? Nothing. You want to read a book? Nah. You want to, play a game? Nah. Can you set the table for dinner? No, I'm busy. What does that mean? What happened? So imagine your best friend walks into the room and he's very engaged in something important. You understand? But imagine he walks in and he says, nothing. I have nothing to do. What do you mean? I'm your best friend. Talk to me. Nah, I'm busy. What happened? So that's what Torah study is. Torah study is our opportunity to be in conversation with Hashem. So Hashem, so to speak, understands, okay, I have to go to work and I have to eat lunch and I have to do the laundry. I understand. But to say, I have nothing to do, you have nothing to do, talk to me. I'm your best friend. Connect with me. Learn Torah with me. So for that, kafakel is not enough. And again, I wasn't doing nothing. That's the problem. It's an opportunity. There's a story told about a man. It's a longer story, but ultimately, the Rebbe said, look, you're a businessman, right? I'm also a businessman. That's the key to the story. The Rebbe says, I'll make a deal. If you'll agree to put on tefillin every day, I'm telling you, you're going to have children. So, of course, he puts on tefillin and he has kids. But the question is, what does the Rebbe mean? I'm a businessman. I'm not a businessman. I'm a rabbi. What does he mean? He means that in business, one of the great lessons is today's opportunity will not come again tomorrow. Tomorrow will be new opportunities. But a business person understands the importance of seizing every opportunity and not saying, well, I'll get tomorrow's opportunity. Well, it's the same thing, especially with time-oriented mitzvahs. I got to eat matzah today. Well, tomorrow's tomorrow. I got to say the Shema today. What about tomorrow? Tomorrow. So missed opportunities, again, I wasn't doing nothing, is not acceptable. And here, in a certain sense, it's worse. Again, if an employer hires an employee and he's paying him, and you say, what did you do today? Nothing. Again, tell me 5 things you did this week. not an outrageous question. I mean, people don't like it and so on. It's not an outrageous question. I didn't do anything bad. I didn't burn the university down. I didn't do anything bad. But not doing nothing is not good enough. And this is that idea why missed opportunities, wasting time, again, we're not just wasting, but annulling it. I'm saying it's not a value. Rak oinshim chamurim shemanishin al bitol teira protos mavad oinish lakloy lechol bitol mitzvahs esay machemes atzlois begehenim shel shelig. It's pretty hard stuff here. The Alter Rebbe says that there's a specific form of repair. You can call it punishment, but its goal is repair for missed opportunities of Torah study, in addition to the general idea of missed opportunities of mitzvahs, which is the punishment of Gehenim of snow. Now, again, the Alter Rebbe is not just trying to scare you into doing what's right. He's telling you what is snow? Indifference, cold indifference. And cold indifference is what leads us to ignore mitzvah opportunities. And that's why the consequence and the repair for these missed opportunities is Gehenim of sheleg, of snow, because cold indifference is the cause of missed mitzvah opportunities. What about if I engage my intellect in the study of what we would call secular or non-holy ideas of science or other study? Now, I know everyone's about to jump up and down here. Just be patient. Wait till we get to the end, okay? Don't get ahead of yourself here. That is, in a certain sense, going to be worse because now I have taken this great gift of intellect, which is my ability to get outside of myself and incorporate ideas into my identity. And if I'm lazy, I'm lazy. But now I'm not lazy. Now I'm enamored with Socrates or Aristotle or Milton Friedman or whatever it is. And now I brought the. I know your parents go, what? Just wait till we get to the end. Don't hang up. Just wait till we get to the end. Like it says in the laws of Torah study. Now, this can be worse. Now, look what the Alter Rebbe says, and here you got to be real cautious, and I can feel the tension. Just be patient. It's talking about the wisdom of the impurity of the servers of piles. Now, servers of piles is a very derogatory term that we use for idolatry, because the idea is it just winds up as a pile of junk. That's why we use that term, server of piles, because you're serving things, you're pursuing things that just wind up in the garbage. Anybody want a BlackBerry, Palm Pilot, Commodore 64? There was a time when we thought those were absolutely the cat's meow. And now it's just junk. It's just clutter. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is referring to here. I'm going to get to studying science and math and literature. We'll get there. Don't worry. But here the Alter Rebbe is starting off and saying this is worse than just doing nothing. Because now I have taken my most elite character trait of intellect, the ability to, again, imagine something outside of my own life experience, to incorporate something outside of my identity within my identity, to have this concept penetrate my very being. And instead of using it to elevate myself into godliness, I've now used it in the service of nonsense. So it's worse than just I wasn't doing nothing and just don't bother me. And I'm sort of sitting here on the couch because now I have aligned myself with this. Now, I just sort of share a quick story. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who I hope everybody here knows who that was. He was, for many years, the chief rabbi of Great Britain. I mean, he's passed away a few years ago already. And he was not a Lubavitcher Chassid, but he had a very strong connection with the Rebbe. And in fact, it was the Rebbe who recommended to him and he followed to become a rabbi. That was not in his plans. And it kind of worked out for him, too. So he told the Rebbe that one of his hesitations was that if he became a rabbi and he committed himself to the study of Torah, it would diminish his ability to appreciate the other fine things of the world. Now he's not talking about indulgence and corned beef sandwiches. He's talking about art and science and so on. Now, imagine this story. We might speculate, what is the Rebbe going to say? You might say, "Oh, who needs all that stuff? We got Torah so much better." I mean, that is a certain argument that you could make. But that was not what the Rebbe said at all. The Rebbe said, on the contrary, that engaging in Torah will refine your sensitivities to give you a greater appreciation. I know this is not an exact quote, a greater appreciation of the arts, whether it's physical art or music or philosophy and so on. So you go, whoa, 1 second. I thought you're telling me that's a bunch of piles. I thought you're telling me that it's fooey, yucky, icky poo. Stay away. Now, it is true that historically, Torah people, communities, have had a very uncomfortable relationship with art. But that's not because it's art. That's because A, a lot of it was Catholic. B, a lot of it was very immodest. And C, that whole culture tended to encourage and exhort a whole immodest and ungodly tone to it. But there is nothing innately ungodly with art. So much so, I mean, the Hasidic Art Institute, people have maybe heard of Reb Mendel Futerfas, one of the great Hasidim. His brother, who had a different last name because that's how they got out of Russia, was Reb Henoch Lieberman, and he was an artist. I mean, on our calendar, most of those paintings are his. Reb Mendel Futerfas himself, what did he get caught going to jail for? For forging passports, because he was artistic. So we have no opposition to art per se. Again, in context, a lot of art historically in Russia and Poland and so on was Catholic and immodest, and like I was saying, that whole milieu was not one conducive for holiness. So what are we talking about? Again, this is the point. When you serve the piles, that is, when instead of seeing this as a looking glass into godliness, instead we become enamored by the artist. One of the concerns the Rebbe had with people going to college was you become enamored with the professor. You start to see that. Again, you're saying about literature, the same thing. Is it in the service of the literature, or is it an opportunity for me to be able to see the godliness that is there? So again, unless it's immodest and idolatrous and that whole thing, which that there's a very, very strong presence of that in what we call museum art, again, immodesty and Catholic and so on. But if it's not that, it's that opportunity. There is a story that the Rebbe Rashab once went to a museum. I don't know if it was the Hermitage, wherever it was, and he looked at this certain painting and he said, this artist touched his bittel. He totally touched it and it came through him. So he didn't say, ew, gross, or what a waste of silly nonsense. That wasn't his attitude. It wasn't like, oh, who cares, stupid, and so on. So again, this is the challenge that the Alter Rebbe is laying out for us. If it's usher, again, immodest, it's usher. If it's mutter, it's an opportunity. If I misuse the opportunity, I miss and I plunge the godliness deeper because I become enamored with the art and the artist and the fame and fortune and not with Hashem. But if I use it as an opportunity to see godliness, that God has entrusted this ability to a human being and that his bittul has come through him, now it's a godly experience. So that's harder. If you just tell me no, fine. No is no. But if you're telling me it's an opportunity, then I have a responsibility to that opportunity. So in that sense, it would be worse. Al tubas devarim b'telim. So again, if it's oivdei galulim, if it's the service of what ultimately winds up in the garbage, that's worse than just I wasn't doing nothing. Because now I've invested myself in the shmutz. She'enu malbish matama rak hamidus mised haruach hakodesh shebenafsh elikis betumas klipas noiga shebedvarim betelim. Because if I do dvarim betelim, so again, I missed my opportunity. You know, there was someone I could have helped. I could have gotten a ride. I could have invested in that thing, and I just let it go. But what's worse is if I invest in something that's bad. So I didn't invest in Microsoft and Apple and Amazon. Okay, that was a foolish, missed opportunity. But if I did invest in something that went totally belly up, now that's even worse. So that's why when a person engages their intellect and their passion in something that ultimately is going to fail. Now, again, it's easy for me, and I'm in the business. So you see this, people, they invest themselves in the university, they invest themselves in the military. They think this is something I can believe in. And ultimately, all things will disappoint you. The Talmud says that Mashiach will come when all governments are corrupt. We go, check. No, the point is not that the government is corrupt. The point is that we make that mistake, that we think we invest ourselves in people, even at the highest level. They're just people doing the best they can. But we project on them that they're going to solve our problems. Once we realize that they're flawed human beings doing the best they can, and we have, the story of the couple who came to the Rebbe, not our Rebbe, to a Rebbe for a bracha, and he made some crazy demand on them, and they said, forget it, we have Hashem. And they said, that's the point. Don't come to me. You got to come to Hashem. So, and then you see me as a vehicle. So the doctor is a vehicle of Hashem to bring the cure. The engineer is a vehicle of Hashem to bring the invention. That's the greater challenge. Shrimp is shrimp. That's it. Don't eat it. The kosher food is the harder thing, because now I got to eat it in a godly way. Like we talked about, it's easier to fast on Yom Kippur in the service of Hashem than it is to eat on Erev Yom Kippur in the service of Hashem. Because fasting I don't like. So of course I do it for the service of Hashem. Eating I like. Why am I eating? To serve Hashem. Now you're talking. Okay. Rak hamidus mised haruach hakodesh menafshel kis betumas klipas negesh dvarim betelim haboim mised haruach hara shebeklipas zay benafshay bahamis kidliel v'loy bechinas chabad shebenafshay me'achshem divrei shtus ubuda shegam hashetim v'amei haaretz yichen ledaber king. So here the Alter Rebbe is not only describing the evils of dvarim betelim, of nonsense. And what's worse is when I invest my intellect in the service of something ungodly. But here the Alter Rebbe is really starting to move us towards what is ultimately the whole philosophy of Chabad, which is that we are a combination of our intellect. And when I say intellect, I don't mean my SAT scores, and I don't mean how many pages of Torah I've studied. We mean primarily my willingness to go outside of myself. One of the reasons why the word for reason and the word for flavor is the same, tam, is because intellect acts in many ways like food, just like food is outside of me. And I ingest it, and it becomes part of my being. And I eat healthy food, and my whole body is healthy. Or if I eat unhealthy food, my whole body is unhealthy. Well, in a similar manner, our intellect allows us to go outside of ourselves and incorporate ideas. If they're godly ideas, it's like eating healthy food. Everything about me becomes godly. If it's ungodly ideas, like we're discussing here, so it's like eating unhealthy food. Everything about me becomes unhealthy. Yes. You have to unmute.
Right. Oh, here. Can you hear me?
I do.
Okay. So my question, I'm thinking about all of this, and I'm just thinking about, like, with my job, like, how do you balance all of this? Because I have to still put effort into my secular job,
We're going to
and
get there.
it's
Remember, I
very
told you have to be
hard.
patient.
Right.
We're
Okay,
going to get
sorry.
there. It's not
Yeah.
hard. You're going to see it. We're getting there. That's why I told you have to be patient. We're getting there.
Okay,
Alter
okay,
Rebbe is going to address this exactly this
okay.
point. Okay. So here, though, the point I want to make is not just how this concept reflects on this specific idea, but this is like the premise setter for the whole philosophy of Tanya, that our access point to godliness is our intellect. And again, when I say intellect, I don't mean how smart you are, and I don't mean how much Torah you've studied. I mean your willingness to incorporate something that is completely outside of you, like food. It's a lot harder than it sounds, right? Learning is disruptive. I don't just mean data accumulation, that now I know the name of all 50 state capitals. I mean genuine learning, going outside of my routines and so on. It's discomforting, and we got a lot of resistance. It's the old, oh, so what you're really saying is, and then instead of being changed by the experience, I have now tidied it up into something that I know already, so it doesn't disturb me, because it's hard. Leaving Mitzrayim is hard. Lech lecha, Hashem says to Abraham, it's hard. It's discomforting. So that's a bit of a setup. As it relates to this specific context, we're saying that when a person engages their intellect in the pursuit of ungodliness, so they are contaminating this greatest of human capacities. They've now bashmutzik it. They have now made it filthy. So that's worse than just nonsense, because nonsense is nonsense. Doodling, it's mindless. It's not good. We're not encouraging it. But at least I haven't squandered my greatest asset. Now, what I have squandered is time, because I ain't getting that time back, like we talked about before. 5 minutes spent wasted, I ain't getting that back. And that's an opportunity. And someone else is out there and they're on their toes at every moment to seize another godly opportunity. And if I just sort of let it pass through my field of vision and ignore it, it's gone. However, when you're talking about the wisdom of the nations that serve piles, that is when I invest my intellect into something other than godliness, so now I have bashmutzik, I have dirtied up this greatest gift. But look what the Alter Rebbe says here, something really, really challenging and significant. This is described as klipas noiga. Remember, klipas noiga means klipa, it's a shell. What is this? It's a microphone. But noiga, there's godliness. There's godliness in the microphone. Well, look, we're using it to study Torah. Oh, okay. So this wisdom that the Alter Rebbe is referring to, where does it come from? He doesn't say, well, it's stupid. That would be the easiest thing. They're stupid, we're smart. We're better than they are. We won more Nobel Prizes. Torah is smarter. No, it's not the competition. So how is there wisdom in all of this? There's a whole volume of Talmud dedicated to understanding the processes of idolatry. Because if we're going to prosecute someone for idolatry, we got to know that they're doing idolatry. Do we simply say that every idolater was an idiot? No. They're smart guys. My favorite analogy, so I'm dating myself here, is Coke 2. People remember Coke 2? But you don't remember Coke 2. It was before you were born. So Coke's been pretty successful. You probably heard of it. Probably everyone heard of Coke. Most successful brand in the world. And in 1982, they decided, you know what, I got a better idea. Let's change the formula of Coke. Now, you think those people were idiots? Okay, it was a total flop. You think the CEO of Coke didn't graduate first in his class from the Kellogg School of Business? He's a genius. What happened? He got silly. But if you would have asked him in the time, he would have given you a 20-page study. He would have given you all kinds of rational thoughts. This is the chachma of holiness that falls into unholiness through shviras hakelim, bibechinas acharayim shel chachma kedusha kiyidu al yedei chen. This is something called shviras hakelim. Shviras hakelim translates as the breaking of vessels. So here's the backstory. It's a bit of a Kabbalistic concept, and I'll do my best to lay it out for you. It's got a backstory. Imagine if you were putting marbles in a bag, You put in as many marbles as you can. They charge you 10 cents a bag, a jewel, so you got to squish in as much as you possibly can. But what happens? You pick up the bag and the marbles fall all over the place. Some marbles fall right at your feet. Others roll under the couch. And what is our goal? To collect up all the marbles. What's the analogy? God creates the world. God puts godliness in the world. God and the world are innately like a package with too many marbles. I mean, godliness is just too much for this world. So the godliness splatters all over the place. Sometimes it's in very obvious places. Other times it's rolled under the couch and it's not such obvious places. You can't even find it. And you can't imagine how in the world did a marble wind up over there? Well, this is what's happened when God puts godliness into this world. It gets splattered all over the place. And once in a while, you're going to find godliness trapped in some other form of intellect. The previous Rebbe lived through the time of the communist revolution. Now, it may seem ridiculous in hindsight that there were Jews who were in favor of communism. And of course, I would have known. And when your alternative is the czar, anything looks better. So, as often happens, everyone is a chacham, and they're all debating which one of the forms of government is Torah. Is Torah monarchy? Is Torah socialist? Is it democratic? Is it capitalist? And so on. So they came to the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, in the 20s, and they asked him, which one of these systems is Torah? Is Torah a democracy? Is Torah a monarchy? And so on. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, Torah is its own system. The good which you will find in every other system is from the Torah value that trickled into that system. So you can find a Torah value in socialism, and you can find a Torah value in monarchy, and you can find a Torah value in democracy. That's as a result of the shviras hakelim, the broken vessels, the scattered marbles. You find them here and there. So why is it that, as the Talmud says, if you are told that there is Torah amongst the nations, do not believe them. If you are told that there is wisdom amongst the nations, believe them. Now, again, maybe this is more even my parents' generation, or maybe it's mine. We've all heard those disparaging, nasty things, stupid goyim, Jews are smart, Jews love education, and so on. Well, first of all, that's past, because everybody's cardiologist is now Asian. They're not Jewish anymore. That generation is gone. And there's plenty of smart Gentiles and plenty of stupid Jews. But it made us feel good. And yes, we had disproportionate in the Nobel Prize in the whole story. Okay, it's not a bad thing, but it's missing the point. You think there aren't smart Gentiles? You think the idolaters were idiots? You think even the socialists and all these people with their failed plans at the moment that they were so dumb? They're godly, the wisdom is there because it trickled in like the marbles. But that's not where you should put your identity. Your identity needs to be in godliness. Now we have the question, so what about not only my own personal parnasa, what about the Rambam, who was a doctor, and the Ramban, and so on, and great sages who were engineers, and the Rebbe went to the Sorbonne, and this guy was, and so on. So here we get to the answer. Fine, remember I told you to be patient? Here's the payoff. Elim Cain, unless it's very much like in this week's Parsha, Moshe tells Aaron, never go into the Holy of Holies. Never. Okay, this is how you go into the Holy of Holies. Well, you just told me never. Right. Because the mentality is never. Now, it's like a parent tells the kid, you never do that. Never. If it's an emergency, but you never, ever, and so on. Elim Cain, oisam kardim lachtech ben. Here's really the distinction. Unless you are making this scholarship a tool to chop with, which is taken right out of the Pirkei Avos, which tells us not to do this with Torah. If you are utilizing this scholarship for a practical purpose, that's fine. A woman once wrote to the Rebbe, she wants to become a typist to support her family. And the Rebbe said, type, don't be a typist. Don't make that your identity. Now, maybe this is more men than women, I don't know. But people, so what do you do? I have a friend. They say to him, so what do you do? He says, when? When? What's your job? What did Yonah say? I'm a Jew and I fear Hashem. Oh, how do I make parnasa? I'm a brain surgeon. But that's not my identity. Because we all know that one day you're not going to be able to brain surgeon anymore. Bill Gates, when he had a child, they said, what's the most important lesson? He said, you know this kid? They don't even know that I'm Bill Gates. When this kid is crying, I said, you know, I run the whole world. They're not impressed that I run the whole world. So all of our parnasa, all of our accomplishments, we're all going to wind up, what they say, life is a young man's game and time is undefeated. So don't make that your identity. That's the point the Alter Rebbe is saying. You want to use it as a tool. You go to medical school to learn how to be a doctor so that you can doctor to make parnasa and help people and so on, but don't make that who you are because it's going to go away one day. It's avodas galulim. It's serving something that just winds up in the garbage. Tahainu, what does that mean? Kidei lehisparnes behen bereva. The Alter Rebbe throws in a key word here. To make a lot of parnasa. It doesn't just say so I can survive and not die. And make a lot of parnasa. Why do you have to become a brain surgeon? Why do you have to become a hedge fund manager? You go get a simple labor job and you won't starve to death. It's not just about survival. It's about abundance. Again, what to do with the abundance using the service of Hashem. But that's what the Alter Rebbe is saying. So again, it's not two people are sitting. One guy's reading the Chumash, the other guy's reading the newspaper. Which one is serving Hashem? It's a trick question. You can't know. This guy's reading the Chumash because he's trying to find something that he can make fun of and so on. And this guy's reading the newspaper because it helps him make parnasa so that he can support his family and his community. So it's a trick question. So before Tanya, it was very easy. Bread and water, okay. Hamburger once a week. Pizza twice a month, and then you had a scale. Now the Alter Rebbe is telling you, buddy, it's all about the intent. As long as it's permitted. If it's prohibited, but that which is usser is usser, usser, usser. Ironically, as I mentioned, there's a whole volume of the Talmud called Avodah Zarah. So the kid comes home from yeshiva, and his mother says, "What did you learn?" "We learned Avodah Zarah, how to serve idols." "What?" "I'm calling." Because if you're going to prosecute someone for serving us, you got to know what it is. So this guy learned all about how to serve Mercury or this. He spent the whole day in yeshiva studying all about it. And he's serving Hashem. Why? Because of the intent. What is the goal? So what is the value of a secular education? Only to serve Hashem. And again, you see it in our world. Sometimes people fall into this trap. That's their whole identity. They go into debt because I have to go to this particular school and a dream school and a reach school and a safety school, and this is my identity, et cetera, et cetera. Instead of, what do? When? Or that same friend says, I only want to work part-time, 40 hours a week. It's not my life. Okay. La'abed Hashem, in order to ultimately serve Hashem. So this guy is reading the laws and he's studying all the intricacies of idolatry and he's serving Hashem. And this guy is reading the Chumash and he's trying to mock Hashem. So again, it's not about the action, it's about the intent. Yes, we got a question. Somebody. You got to unmute.
Okay, thanks. So the sons of Joseph, the Issachar and the one was the scholar and
Zvulun
made the academies, and the other one had ships and a big sailing business and big business.
Yeah. The Rambam had the same deal with his brother.
Who did? Sorry.
The Rambam.
Both are serving Hashem. He may be very involved in the business and the ledgers and the ships, but
he's even mentioned one time before his brother, even though his brother was older, because in a way, he's greater because the bills get paid. He did it. Who's monitoring the brother that he's literally spending every moment studying Torah? Yeah, absolutely. So again, as long as it's mutter, the question is, what is the intent? What is the intent?
Thank you.
Sure. Or he wants to serve Hashem. We have to know the laws of when you can violate Shabbos in order to save a life. So you got to know medicine. You got to know the laws of Kiddush HaChodesh, how to determine the new moon. So you have to know the rules of astronomy. You want to be able to adjudicate the legalities of a contract. You have to know contracts. Again, it's not the action, which would make it so much simpler. Wouldn't that be nice? It's the intent, which makes it much more demanding. You got to eat pizza l'shem shamayim. If I'm eating matzah, it's a little easier. I don't like it. It doesn't taste good. Why am I doing it? Serve Hashem. Sit in the sukkah when it's cold and rainy. It's more a service of Hashem. I don't like it. Can I drive a Lexus in the service of Hashem? That's the greater challenge. As long as it's mutter. Again, if it's usser, it's usser. If it's mutter, the question becomes, am I doing it in the service of Hashem? Zehu taimo shal harambam v'ramban zal v'siyatan sh'osku behen. And that, in fact, is the reasoning behind Maimonides and Nachmanides, Rambam and Ramban, who were skilled. Rambam was a physician. He knew the rules of astronomy. He studied all the Greek sciences and so on. And again, in the service of Hashem. This guy's reading science in serving Hashem, and this guy's reading the Chumash because he wants to make fun of it. He's not serving Hashem. So again, the mutter, it's an opportunity, and our mission is, what are we going to make of that opportunity? And then there's this subtle level that the Alter Rebbe is laying out there about the Chabad, which again is not about how smart I am, but about my ability to connect with something outside of myself. And it's going to go somewhere. As Pirkei Avos says, if I remove the yoke of heaven, I wind up yoked with something else. With the stock market, with CNN, with the government, with the baseball, it goes somewhere. My passion is going to go somewhere. And if it becomes identified with something else, it is ultimately gilulim, just piles, because it will ultimately disappoint you. Again, and it's not even the fault of that which the person invested. It's just a bunch of other people doing the best they can. They're all doing the best they can. So if we make our identity, our jobs or our whatever it is outside of Kedusha, it will ultimately disappoint us.